The man who cannot control his own tongue destroys the empire he tries to build. Every word is either an act of power or a leak of weakness. Speech reveals intentions, fears, and needs with the precision of an involuntary confession. The man who talks too much believes he commands the discourse, but he is ruled by his own urge to be understood, and the one who needs to be understood has already lost control. The tongue is a double-edged blade. It can wound the enemy or cut its owner. Throughout history, empires have fallen not because of armies, but because of poorly measured words, promises, insults, unnecessary revelations. The true strategist understands that power lies not in sound, but in restraint. Silence is the wall that separates the master from the servant, the dominant from the reactive. When a man rushes to speak, he abandons his inner throne. He explains too much, defends too much, tries to convince, and in doing so, he gives away what is most valuable, the map of his own mind. Every justification is an exhibition of weakness. The cold man observes the same situation but remains still, allowing the other to expose himself through excess words. The one who speaks first undresses himself. The one who listens deciphers. The urge to speak is born from the fear of emptiness. Many confuse silence with uncertainty, but silence is control. It creates discomfort, forcing the other to fill the space and, in doing so, reveals his true level of self-mastery. The man who commands silence is like a shadow. He doesn't need to move to be noticed, nor explain to be understood. His presence speaks for him. The mouth is the most visible reflection of an undisciplined mind. Every man who reacts with quick words is a slave to his emotions. He believes he is defending himself, but in truth, he is surrendering. Verbal self-control is the first form of self-mastery, and the first step toward respect. Silence is not the absence of response. It is the construction of the perception of strength. Power begins in the pause before speech. Every second of restraint is an invisible strike against instinct. It is within that interval that the cold man decides whether something deserves a response, and how. The one who masters his tongue becomes impenetrable, because nothing in his speech betrays what he feels, thinks, or plans. The world fears what it cannot understand, and silence by nature cannot be understood. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, the man who stays silent becomes an authority. He does not compete for attention, he attracts it. Mastery of the tongue is mastery of the mind, and the one who speaks only when necessary carries a presence that others try to reach through shouting. In the end, the sound that destroys power is the same that builds it, one's own voice. The modern man believes that speaking is a sign of intelligence. He lives under the compulsion to explain, justify, and prove. But what he calls expression is, in truth, exposure. The more he speaks, the more he reveals what he tries to hide. Speech is a disguised confession. Each word carries the unconscious desire for acceptance, and the desire to be accepted is the denial of power. The man who needs to explain himself has already lost. The need to convince is the symptom of a lack of authority. Power does not argue, it is recognized. The one who speaks to be understood places himself beneath the listener because he seeks validation. True strength lies in saying little and letting silence impose meaning. Words persuade, silence commands. Uncontrolled speech is an act of vulnerability. It exposes haste, insecurity, and a lack of self-control. When a man tries to show what he knows, he reveals what he fears others doubt, and when he tries to show what he feels, he hands over the keys to his own mind to the observer. This is why strategists never speak on impulse. They speak with calculation, and when they do, every syllable is a tactical move. The ordinary man believes that power lies in being heard. The lucid man understands that power lies in being feared. Fear is born from uncertainty, not explanation. When you talk too much, others decipher your intentions. When you speak little, they are forced to guess. The fear of being misunderstood is weakness. Power does not seek to be understood, it demands to be respected. In a room full of voices, silence is the only presence that truly commands. Those who observe without haste see the structure of the game. Every word spoken is a piece moved, and the more the other talks, the more predictable he becomes. That is why the man who controls himself turns dialogue into a trap. He listens, collects, and analyzes. The other's speech becomes raw material for control. Verbal power does not lie in saying what you think, but in making others think what you want. And for that, excess is the enemy. Speech must be a blade, not a flood. Silence prepares the ground. The word concludes the strike. Speaking less is a form of psychological economy. It saves energy, preserves mystery, and enforces hierarchy. What is said can be challenged. What is withheld cannot be touched. When a man learns to resist the impulse to explain, he discovers something far more dangerous: the allure of ambiguity. Others begin to project meanings, trying to decipher what he refuses to reveal. And in this game of interpretation, power changes hands. The one who speaks too much tries to rule through clarity. The one who speaks little dominates through doubt. The first wants to be heard. The second is inevitably observed. Silence is the space where power manifests itself. It doesn't need words to be recognized because its strength lies in absence. When a man masters silence, he stops reacting to his surroundings and begins to shape them. People speak to fill discomfort. He remains quiet to amplify it. And in that gap between sound and pause, hierarchy is established. Most people fear silence because within it there is nowhere to hide. Speech allows disguises, masks, and versions. Silence offers no shelter. It exposes who has control and who needs noise to exist. When a man endures silence, he shows that he can remain within himself without seeking external approval. Power begins the moment the need to explain dies. In any environment, the man who speaks little and observes much becomes the gravitational center, not because he seeks attention, but because the control of his reactions makes him unpredictable. Others watch him, try to interpret him, and in that effort they place themselves beneath him. Silence generates curiosity, and curiosity is submission in disguise. The one who makes others think of him already dominates without acting. Silence is also a weapon of psychological warfare. When someone provokes you, they expect a quick response. They want the sound of your reaction, the proof that they've hit you. But if you remain silent, you return the weight of expectation. The other begins to doubt his own strength, feels the void of your absence, and becomes destabilized. Silence is the revenge of the cold man. He doesn't need to strike, only to withhold. There is power in looking without speaking. The prolonged pause creates tension. Every second without words is an invisible message. I don't need to answer you. The man who masters this gesture shows no anger, only control. And control, when perceived, is the highest symbol of authority. It's not about staying silent to avoid conflict, but staying silent to display dominance. Silence is not escape, it's command of the field. Silence also separates those who think from those who react. The reactive man is a slave to sound. The strategist is a master of time. He understands that power lies in delaying movement, in observing chaos before intervening. Speaking at the wrong moment wastes advantage. Silence is the waiting before the precise strike, the interval that precedes accuracy, and accuracy is the mark of the strong. In the end, silence is not the absence of communication, but its purest form. It communicates status, intelligence, and inner control. While others shout to prove their worth, the silent man imposes himself through calm. He is the fixed point amid the noise, the presence no one can ignore. Because in the realm of power, the one who endures silence rules over those who fear the void. The impulsive man is the one who surrenders most easily. He confuses reaction with strength and speed with control. He lives as if the world were a test of immediate response, and because of that, he becomes predictable. The rush to speak, justify, or defend himself exposes that he lost control before even realizing it. Power is not fast. Power is patient. Impulsiveness is the most common form of weakness disguised as courage. The man who cannot wait speaks to relieve the discomfort of being challenged. He feels the need to react to prove to himself that he still has some control, but it is in that very gesture that he loses it. The one who reacts by instinct does not rule. He is ruled by the stimulus that manipulates him. And in the realm of power, the one who reacts first obeys. Impulse is the enemy of strategy. Every war is won through calculation, not anger. The man who speaks at the wrong time reveals his mental map, his vulnerabilities, and even his future intentions. When someone provokes him and he answers quickly, he exposes the point where he is weak. Silence in this case is more than defense. It is an invisible counterattack. The cold man waits, observes, and acts when the other has already exhausted all energy trying to pull him off balance. Verbal impulsiveness also destroys reputations. The man who cannot control his tongue becomes trapped by his own words. What was said in anger cannot be unsaid in regret. In environments of power, every word is recorded, remembered, and used. That is why the strong speak little. They understand that a single phrase can be a weapon, and weapons should only be used when victory is certain. The one who speaks without thinking fires upon himself. Self-control is the true proof of strength. Not reacting to provocation is an act of supremacy. The impulsive man believes that silence is submission, but he is mistaken. Silence is the highest form of dominance because it forces the other to carry the weight of his own intention. When a man restrains himself, the aggressor becomes a prisoner of doubt. Why didn't he react? And doubt corrodes more deeply than any word. Impulsiveness is the absence of internal hierarchy. The man who controls it shows that he governs himself, and the one who governs himself is untouchable. Speaking less is a declaration of authority. Speaking at the right moment is an execution. The cold man does not defend himself. He observes, decides, and acts with precision. And that precision is what separates the respected from the replaceable. In the end, the impulsive man's mistake is not in what he feels, but in what he lets escape. Power does not lie in reacting, but in choosing the exact moment when silence turns into a strike. The man who masters that interval never needs to prove anything, because the simple act of restraint already reveals who is in control. Authority is not imposed through volume, but through scarcity. A man who speaks little creates the sense that every word carries weight. He turns silence into sacred ground and speech into a rare event. When he finally speaks, everyone listens, not because of the sound of his voice, but because of the symbolic value it has gained. Respect is born from economy. Waste is born from the need to be noticed. The ordinary man speaks to fill the air. The man of power speaks to move the environment. One uses words as an escape from his own emptiness, the other as an instrument of precision. Verbal economy is the quietest form of hierarchy. The higher the level of mastery, the fewer explanations are needed. The clarity of power does not come from speech, but from the presence that precedes it. All true authority is measured by the ability to sustain silence without losing control of the situation. When a man can maintain command without raising his tone, he reveals that his strength depends not on sound, but on perception. The low voice, the steady gaze, the pause before the response, all communicate dominance. The economy of words is, in essence, an economy of energy, and preserved energy is accumulated power. Leaders who truly command understand this rule. They do not explain, they decide. They do not try to persuade, they impose. The secret lies in the cold precision with which they distribute words, as one would distribute rare coins. Every sentence is measured, every pause calculated. The silence surrounding them gives density to their command. The man who speaks little, but rightly, creates a presence that replaces the need for persuasion. An excess of words destroys prestige. He who talks too much becomes predictable, and the predictable is never feared. Mystery is the shield of authority. When others do not know what you think, they instinctively treat you with caution. Uncertainty is the most effective protection. A man who constantly explains himself opens mental doors for those who wish to manipulate him. The one who stays silent keeps them locked. The economy of words also defines the invisible hierarchy within relationships. The subordinate rushes to justify himself. The dominant observes and replies only what is essential. Every silence he maintains reinforces his position. In a world where everyone competes for attention, the man who saves his words becomes an exception, and the exception is always respected or feared. Both reactions serve the same purpose: control. Authority is not built through speech, but through the contrast between what is said and what is withheld. Every spoken word should feel inevitable, and every silence should feel intentional. This combination creates both magnetism and distance. Power does not lie in being understood, but in being felt. And the man who masters the value of the word silently rules over those who still depend on it. The man who reveals himself completely gives up control before he is even tested. Emotional transparency is sold as a virtue, but in practice it is a public confession of vulnerability. The world watches, measures, and uses every exposed weakness. What appears to be sincerity is, in truth, strategic exposure. And those who expose too much become predictable, and the predictable are easy to control. To be transparent is to strip yourself on a battlefield. The man who reveals everything he feels gives others the map of how to manipulate him. When he shows anger, the enemy learns how to provoke him. When he shows attachment, they learn how to control him. When he shows fear, they learn where to strike. Other minds do not seek understanding. They seek advantage. And a transparent man is always a potential advantage. Modern culture has turned exposure into social currency. Talking about feelings, showing weakness, confessing pain, all are seen as signs of courage. But courage is not about opening up. It is about staying closed when the world demands openness. The man who controls his emotions in public is not cold from lack of feeling, but from strategic intelligence. He understands that respect is born from mystery, and mystery is born from silence. Emotional transparency is the opposite of authority. Those who need to be understood place themselves beneath those who listen. True power lies in being deciphered only when one chooses. To show everything is to surrender the advantage of uncertainty. The restrained gaze, the firm posture, and the measured tone are the new forms of armor. They say everything without revealing anything. The man who masters them becomes impenetrable, for his depth is invisible to the ordinary eye. Emotional self-control is the foundation of social power. When everyone reacts impulsively, the man who remains calm appears almost superhuman. His composure disarms, confuses, and intimidates. He becomes the mirror in which others see their own fragility. The rule is simple: never display what you have not yet processed. Exposed emotion is power dissolved. Contained emotion is power preserved. The price of transparency is the loss of respect. When everyone knows what affects you, they stop fearing you. When they know what you desire, they begin to use you. Power requires opacity. To be emotionally opaque is to protect one's inner sovereignty. The man who governs what he feels, and chooses when or if to reveal it, is the only one who remains free in a world addicted to confession. To be impenetrable is not to hide, it is to preserve. The man who controls what he shows lives in a state of permanent advantage. He speaks just enough to maintain the illusion of openness, but keeps the essential to himself. Those who observe him try to decipher, but find nothing. And within that controlled emptiness lies true power, the power of never being fully known. Anger is a raw force. Uncontrolled, it destroys. Channeled, it governs. The ordinary man explodes, talks too much, reacts. The cold man observes, absorbs, and transforms. The difference between the weak and the strong is not about feeling or not feeling, but about who commands the fire. Anger is a tool of power, but only in the hands of those who have learned to tame it before using it. Every provocation is a test. The goal of those who attack you is not to win, but to make you lose control. Each time you react in the heat of emotion, you prove that you can be manipulated. The enemy dominates you without strength. He only awakens your response. Anger makes you speak before you think, act before you calculate, and that mental delay is fatal. True power begins when the stimulus loses control over your reaction. To master anger does not mean to repress it, but to channel it. The man who suppresses emotion creates an internal bomb. The one who transforms it builds an invisible weapon. When someone provokes you, breathe, analyze, observe. Silence in that moment is not weakness. It is strategy. Every second of pause is energy returning to you. While the other shouts, you think, and the one who thinks commands. The urge to respond is the reflex of a wounded ego. The mind wants to restore its image immediately, to prove strength through reaction. But reaction is always inferior to provocation. True mastery lies in reversing the game, turning attack into observation. When you respond late, you respond with power. The delay confuses. The silence disarms. The coldness humiliates. Authority is built in that interval. In environments of power, whoever gets angry first loses. Exposed anger is a public confession of emotional weakness. Leaders, negotiators, strategists all know that the first to raise his voice is the one who has lost his position. Calm is the shield of the dominant. A steady gaze and a low voice destroy the opponent without his awareness. The shout tries to impose. Silence imposes. To master impulse is an act of inner war. It demands self-knowledge and discipline. Each time you restrain yourself, you reinforce the structure of your own mental empire. The man who governs himself does not need to govern others. They naturally align with his rhythm. Serenity in the face of provocation is a silent warning. Nothing you do pulls me out of my center, and that is absolute power. Anger is energy. Control is direction. The man who unites both becomes unbeatable. He wastes no emotion. he turns it into presence. When everyone expects an explosion and receives silence, the impact is deeper, because nothing is more unsettling than a man who should react but chooses only to observe. In that instant, anger ceases to be weakness and becomes authority. The word is a blade. In the hands of the impulsive, it wounds its owner. In the hands of the strategist, it becomes an instrument of command. Calculated speech is the art of turning sound into power. Every syllable must have purpose, every sentence, intention. The man who controls language controls perception, and he who controls perception governs the behavior of others without direct force. The first principle of calculated speech is economy. Saying less amplifies the value of every word. When a man speaks little, he forces others to listen carefully. The silence between sentences becomes a field of tension, and the weight of the pauses makes every sound feel deliberate rather than impulsive. A calm, low, measured voice has more impact than any heated speech. Calmness is the signature of power. The second principle is density. A man who speaks with depth does not need to explain himself. His words carry more than meaning. They carry presence. Speaking with density means choosing words that weigh, not words that decorate. It is turning language into authority by removing adornments and excess. The cold man's speech is precise, and his precision commands respect. His tone becomes a decree, not an opinion. The third principle is calculation. Before speaking, the man of power observes the environment, identifies intentions, and measures consequences. He speaks only when silence has already produced the desired effect. His words never serve emotion, only strategy. When he breaks the silence, it is because he knows the words will now increase, not diminish, his advantage. Every sentence is a tactical move, and the silence that follows is part of the same maneuver. The fourth principle is intentionality. Calculated speech does not seek approval, it seeks effect. The cold man speaks to provoke specific reactions: hesitation, respect, doubt, or submission. His communication is not spontaneous, it is deliberate. He understands that language is a game of influence, and every word alters the board. To speak, therefore, is to move pieces. To speak too much is to expose the king. Calculated speech also defines the kind of power a man projects. The talkative man is seen as emotional, the restrained one as rational. The one who talks too much is remembered for his words. The one who speaks little is remembered for his presence. And presence is power in its purest form because it requires no explanation. The man who masters the art of calculated speech creates a space where his voice echoes even in silence. In the end, mastery of language is mastery of the mind. To speak with precision is to think with clarity. The man who calculates his words controls the environment because the environment reacts to both what he says and what he withholds. Verbal power does not come from being heard, but from being unavoidable. And the man who learns to speak as one who commands, not as one who seeks attention, no longer needs to shout. The world falls silent to listen. Silence is more than defense. It is a form of psychological attack. When used with intent, it turns a man into a mirror, reflecting the other until he exposes himself completely. To speak is to reveal. To remain silent is to induce. Well-placed silence creates a void, and that void forces others to fill it with their own insecurities. Without raising his voice, the man of power guides the conversation, the perception, and even behavior itself. The ordinary man speaks to assert control. The cold man stays silent to gain it. By remaining silent, he creates discomfort. The other, unable to bear the weight of that absence, talks too much, explains himself, tries to interpret what the silence means. Every word spoken by someone who cannot endure stillness is a surrender of power. Silence is the invisible interrogation. It makes the other confess without realizing it. Using silence as manipulation requires precision. It is not the same as withdrawing out of weakness or indifference. It is a calculated act. The man who masters this art does not ignore. He observes. He lets others expose themselves, creates tension, and when he finally decides to speak, his words strike with multiplied impact. Time spent in silence works as stored emotional energy. Every word that breaks that pause carries authority. Silence also serves to invert roles. The one who talks too much becomes dependent on the listener's reaction. The one who remains silent becomes the object of curiosity. The interrogator turns into the interrogated. Power shifts hands quietly. The cold man never demands respect, he extracts it. His lack of response plants doubt, and doubt is the first step toward submission. The other begins to weigh each word, afraid to disturb the balance. Silence is also a form of social punishment. When a man withdraws his attention, he severs the psychological bond the other thought existed. No insult strikes harder than calculated indifference. The absence of response nullifies the aggressor, because anger needs an echo to survive. Without reaction, it dissolves. Silence destroys without confrontation, and dominance is achieved without battle. But the true power of silence lies in the emotional manipulation it creates. It forces others to face their own discomfort, and whoever controls that discomfort controls their actions. The cold man understands this mechanism. He speaks little, but every silence he maintains has intent, to provoke doubt, guilt, fascination, or respect. Nothing in him is empty. Even absence becomes presence. Using silence as conscious manipulation is the subtlest form of command. He does not shout, threaten, or persuade. He simply remains. And in that stillness, the world adjusts to his rhythm. The man who understands the weight of silence never needs to fight for power. He draws it to himself, because while others struggle to be heard, he merely observes and wins. The mouth is the most undisciplined part of the body. It moves before the mind, speaks before awareness, and often destroys what silence had built. The man who fails to control it exposes his secrets, emotions, and intentions. A hasty word is a betrayal of one's own power, because power, when it is real, does not need to announce itself. It imposes through presence, not sound. To speak is to open gaps. Every sentence carries traces of what one tries to hide: fear, vanity, haste, or neediness. The world doesn't listen to what you say. It interprets what you reveal without realizing it. That's why the cold man measures every word like a dose of poison. He knows that one mistake can kill respect. A mouth that speaks too freely turns a king into a servant of his own need to be heard. Silence, on the other hand, protects. It surrounds a man with an aura of mystery and control. Those who speak little are feared because they are unpredictable. No one attacks what they cannot understand. The man who masters his tongue becomes a presence that cannot be penetrated, and in the realm of power, that is invincibility. People can only manipulate what they can predict. Silence makes you invisible in the game of weakness and visible in the game of authority. To master the mouth is first to master the ego. The urge to reply, to explain, to prove something is only the desire to be accepted. But respect is not born from acceptance. It comes from distance. The man who restrains himself displays a rare form of superiority. He does not need to be understood. His strength lies in being indecipherable, and the indecipherable is always stronger than the obvious. There is power in every pause you hold. The man who endures silence in the face of provocation, curiosity, or pressure shows that he is in command of his own chaos. His calm is unsettling, and that discomfort is what enforces respect. People do not fear shouting. They fear the serenity of someone who could destroy but chooses not to. Mastery begins with restraint. The mouth betrays power because power is an exercise in invisibility. Those who talk too much reveal where their throne is. The wise man hides it behind neutral expressions and short answers. He doesn't fight for the last word. He gives it away, knowing that the one who insists on speaking last has usually already lost. In that sense, silence is the most discreet and definitive form of victory. In the end, the rule is simple and merciless. Control your mouth, or it will control your image. Every word spoken must serve strategy, not instinct. The man who learns to stay quiet when everyone else is shouting becomes inevitable. Because true power doesn't need to be explained, it only needs to be perceived. And silence, when it is ruled by mastery, speaks louder than any voice.